So what I want you to do is expose yourself in a way that you start to tell some of your stories within your organization. And when I say exposing yourself, I mean to bring yourself down in the organization, to meet yourself where people are at.
Please welcome back to the stage, Diane McCabe.
Thank you, Craig. And I get to stand this time, which is a lovely change. Very good. So we are going to talk about change and embracing and embodying change as leaders. So I'm going to come with a warning for a start off that there is going to be a buzzword bingo. So any of these, I will guarantee I will say all, if not the majority of these as I talk through this presentation. So feel free, if you've got pen and paper in front of you, to do a tally. You can let Craig know at the end whether I have scored high or low on this. But let me be serious about this, because yes, there are buzzwords and we all roll our eyes when we hear these buzzwords and we tune out to change. But there are two things that I want you to consider about change as I go through this segment. And the first one is, change has never been this fast, and it will never be this slow again. So let that sink in, and I'm going to say it one more time. Change has never been this fast, and it will never be this slow again. So if we think we're pedaling really fast right now, we're going to keep pedaling. And we're doing this at a time when our people in our organizations are running on empty. There's so much fatigue, and I know that's another buzzword, but there's so much fatigue in the people in our teams where we're trying to usher them through change. And it's not just at this level of the organization, it's all levels of the organization. So from the CEO right down to our frontline leaders, everyone is feeling fatigued in some way. So there's the doom and gloom. Okay. So where do we go from here? What is not working? So there are a few things that are not working. And yes, I'm stating the obvious for some of these. So the old carrot and stick, which worked for many, many years, where it's like, we'll give you this, but then we're going to hold you to account to that. That has its place in every organization. But when the wheels start to go off, we have a tendency to go back to the carrot and stick. I've proven the buzzword bingo doesn't work. So having the buzzwords out in the organization, the message no longer lands for our people. And lastly, like I said when I was on the panel here, there is no one size fits all. When we try to copy what other organizations are doing, what other leaders are doing, it may not work in our team, in our department, in our organization. So thanks, Diane. We're all feeling really down in the dumps now. So tell us, what do you actually recommend for this? So let me bring it to you what I think you need to do. You need to expose yourself. She said, what? What did she say? Seriously? You're in a room full of HR leaders and you're telling them to expose themselves. And not only am I telling you to expose yourself, I'm going to ask you to encourage everyone else to expose themselves too. So I better explain. So what I want you to do is expose yourself in a way that you start to tell some of your stories within your organization. And when I say exposing yourself, I mean to bring yourself down in the organization, to meet yourself where people are at. Come with that sense of human connection. Because when we come from a place of, I'm the CEO, I'm the CFO, I'm the head of this department, I am a supervisor in this area, that creates separation between us. So when we come to people with our stories of leadership, that collapses the organizational structure. It reminds people that, hey, we're all human. None of us have this figured out. And lastly, what it does, which I think is the most important, it encourages people to take personal responsibility for leading themselves through change. So I'm going to be a little bit bold and ask you to take away some homework. I want you to start thinking about this now, but there are 3 areas that I want you to consider about stories, your personal stories in your organization. But before I do that, I want to ask a show of hands, first of all, who feels really comfortable sharing vulnerable stories within their organization? Oh, we do have a few. I love it. Do you get that gut-wrenching feeling when you're just about to tell them and your knees wobble a little bit? I see Grant shaking his head over here. I know we've got a seasoned professional in the room. But I do want you to look at this. So this is not just a once upon a time, this is a story that occurred to me. There are 3 stories I want you to reflect on. The very first one is your pandemic story. How did you cope going through the pandemic? And when I say that, I don't mean there was this one time I had COVID. It's literally a story about how did you, when you reflect back on that time, how did you cope? How did you get through it? What were your trials? What were your triumphs as you went through that? Because people in your organization want to hear about this. And in case you're afraid people are going to roll their eyes about this, I want you to think of your non-pandemic story. So, before COVID, when we had stories, other things that weren't related to COVID. But your non-pandemic story is, have you ever been made redundant? Have you ever been passed over for a promotion? Have you ever applied for lots and lots of jobs to leave an organization and kept getting the knockbacks? No matter what it is, maybe there's a project that you led that failed terribly, but you have some great insights from it. So each of you have huge stories to tell, and you're doing your people a disservice by keeping them to yourselves. The last story, and this is for the people who I encourage to really, really dig deep. And as we're approaching Are You OK Day, as we are approaching World Mental Health Day, I would encourage you to think a little bit strongly about this one, because well-being is one of the most important things in all of our organizations. So what is your well-being story? How can you share that in your organization? And I'll give you an example of my well-being story. My corporate career got cut, I won't say short, but it definitely ended when I had a mental health breakdown. And then I got made redundant. And yes, life fell apart, and it took quite a long time for me to get back and get myself back on track. But I went back to the organization that I had my breakdown, thanks to Speakers Institute, so Sam was instrumental in this. But I found the confidence to go back and tell my story in that organization on Are You OK Day. And the people in the room who knew me, who had worked with me, came back and were inspired. Some of them called psychologists, called their GPs, called the employee assistance program. So you have that in you as well. Yes, there are plenty of keynote speakers, and you can call Sam or any of us at any time, but having someone you know and trust in your own organization speaks volumes. So I want you to think about those stories that you have. And these are not, we're not going to ask you to come up on stage at your next all hands event and just declare what this story is. You can talk about it in your one-on-one meetings. You can talk about it when you give feedback to the people on your team. You can talk about it when you're having that career conversation with your team members as well. Weave them into it, and every time get a little bit more vulnerable, share a little bit more. It's not about the advice, it's about the pain. And when Nick mentioned earlier about feeling into change, and feeling is the secret to change, making sure that you're sharing some of the pain as well as some of the triumphs. If you do that, you will be a leader who will inspire change. Why? Because you're demonstrating that you are a leader who embraces and embodies change in your organization. Thank you.